So hello and welcome to the Engineers Ireland talk on starting your career in academic engineering research. My name is Michael Gallagher. I'm here with Engineers Ireland. We have some fantastic speakers coming up. Before we get into the event proper, just to say that if you're a graduate engineer, you're checking out, a mixture of this event, maybe a past event that we have had in this area. This all counts towards your CPD, and the CPD declaration deadline is coming up. So look, it's a really important thing to keep on top of your CPD. You can just log into your profile on the website and declare that anytime, and deadline's coming up at the end of this month. If you're a student, don't forget, free student membership is there for the taking. Just go onto our website, look for the free student membership button. And if you're graduating this year, you can of course become a full member as well for free initially as part of our special offer. This is the current graduate rate at the moment. We're doing a special kind of 4 years post-graduation rate where you can save €700 over your first 4 years. And you can just email us on membership@Engineers Ireland if you have any questions about that. I guess for those of you who are in PhDs, although I know today's talk is more about maybe convincing you to take on a PhD, we do have a special PhD rate where we charge €65 per annum during the course of your PhD / your research. So you can just email membership@Engineers Ireland for more details on that. We'll be delighted to have you. So I'm going to get out of the way now. I might just kind of read Tessa's introduction and welcome our first speaker. Tessa is a second-year environmental engineering, energy, water, environmental sustainable PhD student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I'm so sorry, Tessa, if I'm butchering the pronunciation. She's part of the Horowitz research group, and her research focuses on the intersection of air quality, climate change, and public health. She received her BSc in environmental engineering with energy studies minor at University of Notre Dame, her master's in water, waste, and environmental engineering at UCD through the Naughton Fellowship, and she worked in Dublin for 2 years through the third-level graduate program, completing a corporate sustainable reporting internship and then working as a graduate wastewater engineer. During this time, she was an active committee member of Engineers Ireland, and now she's working on improving air quality forecasts using satellite data through her PhD research. She's involved with the University of Illinois Graduate Society of Women Engineers and the student chapter of American Association of Aerosol Researchers. So Tessa, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you have any slides that you want to share with anyone, you're welcome to get that set up.
Thank you. And now I'm realizing after I submitted my bio of a typo, I was a committee member within Young Engineers Society within Engineers Ireland. So hopefully that makes a bit more sense for people listening in. But yeah, I'll go ahead and share my slides. I kept my slides pretty short, but hopefully we'll just give you an overview of my own PhD journey, and then, some words of advice or things to consider as you consider potentially getting into research or PhD. So yeah, so I did my undergrad at the University of Notre Dame in environmental engineering. When I was a student at Notre Dame, I was involved in undergrad research. So during the summers, I was doing research internships at Michigan State University, which is where I'm from, East Lansing, Michigan originally. So it's just my local university. And as an undergrad, I also got involved in undergrad research at my university. And I also did a summer internship at Argonne National Lab. So very early on, I kind of got my feet wet in research because I thought that would be something I'm interested in and potentially something I want to pursue in the future. And then I got to the end of my degree at Notre Dame, and I had done all these different research experiences, and obviously kind of in different fields because they were at different locations. And I thought, oh my goodness, there's so much I'm interested in environmental research, but I'm not sure exactly what I want to do or what I want to invest a 5-year program in yet for PhD, 4 to 5 years. It kind of depends where you're attending. So I found out about the Naughton Fellowship, which is a fellowship for Notre Dame students to go and do their master's in Ireland for a 1-year master's program. So I thought, this is perfect. I'd love to do a master's. I've always kind of wanted to study abroad. So this is a great opportunity for me to go to another country, learn about environmental sustainability, environmental engineering from an international perspective, and also get more of a taste of where I want to narrow down my research focuses. Another thing about the Naughton Fellowship is that it works both ways. So there's also an opportunity for Irish students to come do their master's at Notre Dame for their 1-year master's program, which is called STEAM, which I think stands for Engineering, Science, Technology, and Entrepreneurship. So it's a big focus on kind of like business and science and bringing, technologies into the market. So I put on the website if anyone's interested in that and exploring that opportunity. So I did my master's at UCD in water, waste, and environmental engineering. And then I learned about the third level graduate scheme where you can, for me as an international student, I can stay in Ireland and work for 2 years after graduation. And, I moved to Ireland. I, fell in love with the country and thought, I'll stay here for a couple of years more. I still really want to do a PhD, but I'd love to stay in Ireland and get some work experience. So, I did a 6-month in corporate sustainability reporting internship at CRH, and then worked for about 1.5 years for Nicholas O'Dwyer as a graduate wastewater engineer. And then coming to the end of that experience, I still wanted to do the PhD, so I applied to several different programs and ended up at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. So that's my journey. That's how I ended up where I am now. And then some just advice for everyone considering a PhD is, do you enjoy doing research, and what topics do you enjoy? I think one of the things I was nervous about when I was applying for PhD programs was I thought I had to have like my whole 5-year plan figured out, like this is what I'm going to research and this is the exact topic I'm going to do. But oftentimes, if you have an idea, that's great, but your advisors are there for a reason to help guide you and help develop your ideas and projects. So I actually applied to do PhDs more in the field of like water and wastewater because that was my previous experience. But I had my current advisor reach out to me and say, I think we have a lot of like similar interests, but I'm on the air and climate side. Would you consider switching? And so I read some of her papers and looked more into that field of science and ended up, I guess, switching from, I'm still an environmental engineer, but instead of doing more like water, wastewater, traditional things you think of when you think of environmental engineering, I'm doing more air quality and climate modeling. Another thing to consider is when you're thinking about what kind of PhD is, do you enjoy lab work? Are you more of a modeler? Because these are going to be very important because it's going to be your day-to-day. I did a lot of lab work in undergrad. I didn't mind that, but I knew I didn't want to do it for a PhD. I had like too many experiences working for a grad student. I'd come in and like something went wrong with the waste activated sludge or something exploded and there was all this waste activated sludge over the lab and you had to clean that up. And I was like, I don't want to be the party responsible for that. So, things always go wrong, but for me, I'd rather it be my code. And then another, like, I think the biggest thing to consider is it required for the career that you want to have. Obviously, if you want to become a professor and go to academia, then yes. But it depends on if you want that. I personally am very interested in policy and doing like research-informed policy, climate, air pollution policy. So for me in environmental policy, it still makes sense, but you have to think critically, like, how will this PhD help me to reach my goals? And then finally, just kind of like a logistics thing. Every country kind of does it differently. So like, especially if you're an international student, the timelines vary a lot when you're looking for funding. So like the Irish time scale would be like different than the UK one, potentially, than the US, than the Netherlands. So it really, like, if you're thinking about a PhD, just start, I don't know, making a spreadsheet or documenting these things early so you're not caught off guard. So it's not that you come to like apply for a PhD and you realize like, oh, I'm non-EU. I would have had to apply like 3 months earlier than all the EU students, because that can be the case sometimes. And also consider like some other countries don't fund like non-national or non-EU. So that is also a challenge. If you're like me, you're not an EU citizen, so you could just run into difficulties. Another good thing to think about is if you want to stay in that country after graduating, what's the visa situation like? Do you have 1 year? Do you have 2 years? Is it a lottery? So that's just something to keep in mind if you are going to another country for your PhD. So yeah, that's all I have for now. I'm looking forward to chatting with all of you during the Q&A.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, I'm going to be sitting a Q&A just after Colin Keogh. Before Colin actually starts sharing his screen, I might just do a bit of an introduction. But Tessa, just as I am doing that to say that your career aspiration of the policy and everything, I've seen some amazing, PhD graduates going into that space and really kind of shaping and informing policy. So look, that's real noble ambition, and you're obviously researching really noble causes. So look, without further ado, I'm going to now introduce Dr. Colin Keogh. And there's an amazing biography on screen. So like if you're watching the YouTube recording later, like definitely do pause and take some of this in terms of some of the incredible things that Colin has done. I'm going to pick out a few things now just before I hand it over to him, but just to say like incredible background in UCD, whether it's his undergrad, his master's and his PhD completed there. Youngest winner of an Irish Research Council Research Award. So many things with particularly all the accolades and awards, like Forbes 30 under 30 for Europe in Science and Healthcare, one of the Junior Chamber Ireland's 10 outstanding young people, and Nissan Generation Next Ambassador. Like there's so much incredible stuff there. I'm sure Colin's going to be touching on some of these things in his presentation, so I might just get out of the way, but to say, look, we're really, really fortunate to have you here this evening, and look, a big thank you for showing up and giving a presentation and insight to everyone. So big thank you to Colin.
Perfect, brilliant. Thank you very much, Michael. So I think I'm going to set up my screen share. I just want to say, yeah, congratulations, Tessa. That was excellent. You were the student I wish I was when I was a student. So it's very nice. You had a very well structured, ordered approach. And what I'm going to talk about is the fact that I really didn't have any structure or order to what I did. So I would encourage you to plan it like Tessa did in comparison to do what I did. So I'm going to screen share with you guys now. And where is it? This should be it. No, perfect. So you should be able to see it. So yeah, my kind of journey in a PhD, it was completely different to that. When I originally started, I never had intentions of doing a PhD at all. So what I did before I did my PhD is as relevant as what I did for my PhD. So I'm going to give you a quick kind of whistle stop tour journey. So I grew up surrounded by, as a car mechanic with my father, working in a small kind of local car mechanics business like that. So if anything, I was a natural born engineer. I was exposed to this problem solving and technical kind of maintenance, repair, vehicles, logical systems from a very, very early age. And like an awful lot of you engineers probably were, you know, kind of Lego and cars and models and Meccano as a kid. So I born natural engineer. And what I like to tell people is I'm exactly the same now as I was then. You know, it's just Lego is bigger and more dangerous, and the cars you play with are more expensive and belong to other people. So what I did was I did an undergrad in mechanical engineering in UCD between 2007 and 2011. I'll be honest and say I wasn't a stellar student by any means. I didn't have like a 1-1 degree at the end. I just enjoyed the process of engineering, and I enjoyed the subjects that I got to study. So in the course of that, I started to focus an awful lot on electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles due to my background. So my final year project was a life cycle assessment of battery and electric vehicles. And be aware this was 2011, so it was a little bit before electric vehicles became as mainstream as they are now. I started out as a mechanical engineer and a petrol-headed lover of vehicles, trying to prove that electric vehicles weren't as clean as people claimed they were. And I was completely wrong. They are, so buy an electric vehicle. So that gave me a love and a kind of desire of working on my own research. I proposed this research project as my final year research project. So it was my creation from the beginning. I'd finished and I had enough of academia and studying, and I didn't want to do anymore. So through a kind of combination and a chance encounter at an event, I met a former engineer from UCD who was working for BMW, and he offered me a job as a design engineer from BMW. At that stage, working on the I cars, the i3 and the i8, before they were released for the public. I was just about ready to go and move to Germany, and got a sudden kind of change of heart and decided I wasn't done studying and wanted to go back and do a master's. So I did. focused on the same area back in UCD, and I was focused on hybrid systems. I did energy systems engineering in UCD. I focused an awful lot on electric vehicles, optimization, energy creation, and renewable energy integration systems going forward. So the capstone of that was, again, an end of year project, which I was lucky enough to be able to partner with a large European consortium project looking at algae energy, generating algae and potential feed products from algae in Northwest Europe. So by way of happenstance, I ended up becoming the country lead for this project, and I took over running Ireland's involvement in this project. So I got a taste of, a higher level academic research quite early, before I had finished my master's. So I started to develop out experience in that kind of research space. And, I liked it. I liked the developing something new. I liked looking for blue sky targets and trying to work towards that, and then kind of finalizing it all in publications and dissemination documents. But on the other side, I was like a child again. I was a very restless engineer. I liked things to change. I like new things. I like kind of causing trouble in a specific space and generating things that were new and kind of innovative. So at that stage, I started a charitable foundation. And it was while I was working as a researcher, I decided I wanted to do something else. And the charitable foundation was the Rapid Foundation. What we did is we donated 3D printing systems to developing regions overseas and helped them with innovation processes and helped them create things that they needed into the future. So education tools, education toys, low-level medical equipment, farm equipment, that sort of stuff. It had no funding. It was me and a fellow student of mine at the time. We just decided to do it. There was just an itch we needed to scratch, so we decided we'd do it. And we did. And it gave me a kind of love for interacting with people that necessarily aren't engineers, the general public, or working in research projects in fields that I probably didn't belong in. So advanced waste recycling, advanced medical fields, that sort of stuff, all via the mechanism of kind of 3D printing. So we were making things like this, low-cost 3D printed assistive technology in braces, couple of euros, huge amount of impact, and I developed a love for seeing tangible impact from research actions and activities. So things like this, real tangible first-hand experiences of having an impact on somebody's life via the medium of engineering. And the surprising thing was it worked. It was a massive career accelerant. It was something an itch we needed to scratch. It hadn't been done before, so it resulted in us getting a huge amount of attention and awards and accolades in this area. So just the kind of itch we needed to scratch ended up being something completely new and innovative. So if any of you want to have that kind of niggling itch you want investigated, I encourage you to do it at all costs. And then that kind of changed the profile and the arc. As Michael said, I was on a Forbes list a couple of years ago, and it opened up a whole new raft of opportunities for me going forward. So I decided I would capitalize on this and use this period to test the waters, for want of a better word. I did not know what I wanted to do. I did not know what field I wanted to work in, if I wanted to stay in research or in academia. So I decided to give it all a try and try a load of them all at once. So that's exactly what I did. I stayed working as a research engineer in UCD and went on kind of flexible schedules from full-time to part-time to contract work, and worked on about 8 or 9 different R&D projects, mainly in energy, but in, environmental protection, in advanced commercialization and innovation, or things like community support and development. And, technologies like 3D printing, applying it to healthcare, medicine, and kind of, archaeology and education fields. Trying things you'd never tried before, like using low-end tools with the United Nations to recycle waste materials to kind of reduce the impact of humans are having on the world. And it resulted in me teaching a stormtrooper how to make a plastic octopus from a plastic bottle we took off Skellig Michael. Crazy experience. That's exactly what I wanted at that time period. So I looked at waste plastic, waste recycling, optimization, and solving these large SDG problems, digitization and advanced technology, applying new technology in fields that wasn't in previously, and seeing how quickly could we get a working concept, up and running. Things that took months now can be done in a matter of hours. And then a whole range of different kind of communication and engagement activities, from science education to policy to, environmental protection to even a rate load of commercial research. So I needed to get a taste for this sort of stuff, and did. At the same time, I wanted to try teaching. So I got an opportunity to teach in a whole host of different institutions, focusing mainly on what I knew: 3D printing, mechanical engineering, and applied innovation actions, applying innovation on the short term and seeing what can come from it. So I was lucky enough to be able to teach and continue to teach in universities around the world doing exactly that, applied innovation action. And the teaching is non-standard. The teaching looks like this, you know, open, large, immersive, first-hand educational experiences. It's not a classroom, me giving you a lecture. It's an engaged, embedded educational experience full of interest and excitement. So that's the way I wanted to be taught. So that's the way I decided I wanted to teach. At the same time, I wanted to see what it was like being a consultant. So I acted as a private engineering consultant. I worked on a range of different projects, from heritage and digitization to, I had a northern Russian oil and gas project, to developing consumer goods and products, to future foresighting and developing the future of healthcare or the future of travel and aviation. Again, I was searching for what excited me in that engineering space, so I needed to test out the field. And currently, I've worked with a huge amount of companies in a huge amount of different fields, again, spread all over the world, all on different projects, all running from a matter of hours to a matter of months or years. So that then inspired me to set up a company, and I set up a company called Sapien Innovations that does exactly that. Engineering consultancy via new methods, hackathons, rapid innovation design sprints, online massive open source investigation systems, just applying new systems and technologies to these global projects. And it resulted in some interesting things. We helped lead the European Commission, which I think counts as the world's largest ever hackathon, with more than 20,000 registrations during COVID. And we were very instrumental in building out functionality and requirements. So, you know, solving large problems super fast with loads of people that maybe don't have skills and expertise in that space. I then was very interested in entrepreneurship. So I tried a range of companies. I think I've founded 6 or 7 companies so far. To be honest, the majority of them didn't work. Some of them did, some of them didn't, but that's the way the entrepreneurship world works. Again, in consumer products, energy, sports, technology, humanitarian relief. I wanted to see if that excited me, and it did an awful lot. So I then became embedded in the global tech community, let's say. So the startup space, the entrepreneurship space, and found this space very, very kind of invigorating. So it told me that I needed to work in a field that had lots of things working all at one time, different projects, short-term projects in different fields and different areas with an applied focus from it. So I ended up doing a PhD. So I applied via the Irish Research Council for funding on a PhD based on, again, a project of my own submission. I went and searched out an enterprise partner, and my partner was the Science Gallery. And what we wanted to look at was the Science Gallery teaches science to non-scientists in a non-formal education setting. So we wanted to see, could these people create new innovations in open manners like I had been doing before? So I undertook a PhD, having said I would never do a PhD ever in my life, but I did one. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I completed it in 3 years. I had a great time working on it, and it developed a whole new host of area and expertise for me and reignited my love for kind of the academic level of research. I was then one of the unlucky ones to graduate bang in the middle of COVID. So I didn't have a graduation, you know, had no ceremony. I got my little scroll in the post that they actually forgot to send me. So, you know, I really got stuck down the cracks of a graduation. But what it meant was I graduated with a desire to look at new innovation methods and methodologies right into one of the richest innovation periods that the world has ever had. That area of 2020 when COVID was hit opened the doors for innovation. So I ended up creating another kind of misguided but very, very fulfilling project called Open Source Ventilator. And we led an online community looking at open source innovations around COVID in general. So we had over 6,000 volunteers from 155 countries. We ran for just over a year and generated, I think, 60 or 70 different new innovative life-saving innovations for COVID and shared them freely under open access and sharing licenses around the world. So again, this is what I wanted to look at. I wanted to look at developing these rapid innovations in new fields and new areas globally, you know, not just focusing in our own backyard. So, for example, we innovated and developed 17 different ventilator concepts over the course of a couple of months, 2 of which went into end stage testing in the US with the military. And thankfully, they were never needed. But again, that's not the point. We wanted to have them if they were needed, and thankfully they weren't needed. That then resulted in me winning an Irish Research Council Impact Award. So it was one of the first times the award had been offered, and I had just graduated. And it was solely because I won the award based on applying your research to real life. And I'll be honest, I got super lucky. Very, very few people get a chance to do a PhD and then literally a couple of weeks later have a direct global real world application for it present itself. So that then offered a whole new other host of opportunities, and the concept of a postdoc popped up. And I did. I applied for it and I won it again via the Irish Research Council. It's starting this year. And the postdoc was with a United Nations sustainability organization called Be Earth. And we're looking at open source interventions for emergencies and pandemics around the world, how we can map it, how we can simplify it, and how governments and large organizations can adopt these external innovations into what they do without disrupting their plans. So the rigid structure of an organization doesn't have to be broken, but then the kind of chaotic innovation from an outside innovator then doesn't have to be constrained in a rigid structure. So my current position is between all of these 4 areas, and I'm delighted with it. I really, really like it. Took an awful lot of work to get there, but I liked it. I get to then work as a consultant, commercializing large EU research and commercial research at the same time. I get to lecture in these innovation fields that interest me. I am an academic, so I publish papers, I do research, I apply for grants and funding and supervise students. But then I also get to be an entrepreneur at the side and run building these businesses and developments. So the reason I tell you this is I took a completely non-traditional path to a PhD and a continuing doing a non-traditional post-PhD path. These options are available. They are there for you. They just take a little bit of kind of intelligent thought, planning, and foresight to get there. So if I had any advice for you all trying to follow a path like that, it would be, one of them is what you're working on. Do good work, continue doing good work, and people will take notice. So, you know what I mean? Do that work and keep sticking at it. Don't focus on a research project or topic just because it's popular or just because there's funding in it. Do the work you're interested in. That will then make it good work. And the more good work you do, the higher the chances other people will notice it and you will go further with that. Promote yourself. It's something I learned by accident early on. If you won't promote yourself in your own work, why should anyone else? So you should take charge of you promoting your own work. And it comes in a whole range of different topics. If someone asks you to speak about your own work, talk about it. It could be a side hobby. It could be your work experience. It could be your final year project. Talk about it. The more you do, the more people hear it, the more opportunities you get. And like some of the non-standard approaches, I had a partnership with Nissan in which, Nissan and myself worked on developmental projects around Ireland and Europe, doing that engaged 3D printing community work. And an awful lot of new opportunities came out of that. I go to tech conferences quite regularly and you get chances to meet very, very interesting individuals. And, projects emerge from that if you're open, honest, and have interesting work to talk about. Now, everyone won't find it interesting, but I guarantee you some people will. You can do projects, groups like IMECE or Engineers Ireland love promoting engineering. So volunteer your time with them. I've done numerous school talks. I've been a STEPS ambassador for Engineers Ireland. I've done a load of the school visits and, open day visits. I was the chair of the Young Engineers Society as well. Take these opportunities and then they will amplify your message, your work, and your reach going forward. So things like, even kids work. This was a series of books in the Irish Times that we had a page in. It was aimed at kids, but more adults recognize this than they do anything else I've ever done. So, don't say no to anything. Even if you don't think it's appropriate, take it. It will benefit you. And then talk, specifically on an online medium. The world works online. Everyone has something interesting they can talk about. So talk about it. If you're invited to give a TEDx talk, do it. If you're invited to give a point of science talk, do it. It exists online and it carries in perpetuity afterwards and you'll get bedded in. Networking is super important. So you find what you want to do and go find other people to do that. And they're the best people to help you get there. So organizations like Engineers Ireland, there's hundreds of engineers through that building every single year and at most events. If you're looking for connections or networks, that's the best place to start as an engineer and grow from there. So go to events, turn up to the networking sessions, go to the annual conference. You never know who you're going to meet. It could be a funder, it could be a PI, it could be a supervisor. You don't know who you need in the future. So the more people you know, the better in the long run. And then the one that's most important for me is do find your passion. It's and I'm sure Tessa will support me here as well, it's next to impossible for you to do research at a high level or a PhD level on a topic you're not interested in. It will kill you. A PhD journey is hard. It's difficult. You'll regret it multiple times. The work will change multiple times throughout the course of it. You have to love doing it. If you don't love doing it, you'll find it very, very difficult. So make sure you do. Make sure you find a supervisor that you can connect with. Make sure you find a university you're comfortable in. Make sure you find an enterprise partner that you get on with. If any of those things are unbalanced or not right, you're going to find it much more difficult in the future, and your chances of finishing are significantly lower. Thankfully, I had a great partner in a great institution with a great organization. And to be honest, I was lucky. Mine was a dream. I would do it again tomorrow. So, put a bit of work into structuring your plan and you will benefit from it in the long run. Sort your funding, as Tess had said, PhDs are expensive. You're not going to earn an awful lot of money from a PhD. Anyone that tells you that is lying to you. You have to love what you're doing. So sort out your funding early. If you're looking at if you're in third year, fourth year, and you're expecting to finish at the maybe end of the fifth year, start looking now. Identify the scholarships, identify the funds, identify the PI, and get early on that. A good source of understanding it for me is this website, Find a PhD. They have a specific section aimed at PhD studies in Ireland. They have a new guide for 2020. Look at that. It explains the structures, it explains the funding mechanisms, the fees, how you apply, and advice on reaching out to potential supervisors. But it also does it for all the countries in Europe and countries outside Europe as well. So look at that to get yourself grounded. And then that's the extent of my kind of journey so far. I think I've talked too long, so I think it's time for some questions, if we're all possible. So thank you for listening to me. I hope that was a whistle-stop tour of somebody that said they'd never do a master's and did one, and then would never do a PhD and also did one. So it's a different journey. So hopefully between Tess and myself, we'll be able to answer any and all questions you might have.
Colin, that was incredible. Thank you so much. And one word that's kind of ringing out to me whenever I'm thinking about your journey is the whole idea of impact. And it's just so evident how you immediately turned your kind of research into very tangible impact. And actually, that's one of the memories that came back to me as you were speaking, was the whole idea of during the pandemic, watching you on the news where you were kind of doing innovative with the ventilators and everything like that. So it was always great to see that kind of stuff. So yeah, look, thank you so much. And I guess I'd like to invite both you and Tessa to a little Q&A before everyone else. Look, if you have questions, throw them in the chat, or else maybe want to knock off the recording, feel free to turn on your camera and ask the questions yourself. The first one, I was just going to maybe take the first two questions and roll them together. The whole idea of maybe the highlights of your PhD journey and your challenges of your research. Colin, you've already kind of touched on them in your presentation as well. So, and Tessa, I know you're kind of in the second year, so you're very much in the midst of it, but Tessa, would you like to have a go at that one? Maybe any particular highlights so far, or any big challenges?
Yeah, so I would say one of my highlights is recently I presented I guess my first poster at a conference. I presented at the American Geophysical Union conference, which was in New Orleans, Louisiana, back in December, and that was just, I think, really great because I feel like for so long, especially during the pandemic, I'm just in my room running my code. Does this even mean anything? And then it was really neat to go to a conference and have people be interested in my work. And I don't know, it felt a bit more fulfilling. And then also just to go to other poster presentations or talks and learn what other people were doing. It was all very exciting, especially at the moment when everything is so remote. So you feel a bit disconnected. And then I would say just another, I guess, highlight, or this is just emphasizing something Colin had said, was that my advisor is amazing. She's great. She's definitely one of my biggest supporters and everything. And I think that's so important to have, because just, you're going to run into challenges, or, your code's going to crash and you're like, should I have even been here? And just to have a good advisor who reminds you, everyone's gone through this process, you belong here, don't feel that imposter syndrome. That I think that's very important too. I think challenges of research journey, I touched on, I feel like it's very easy, especially earlier on, especially if you're kind of in a new field, to feel imposter syndrome, you're working with new data, you're working with a new program, and it's, it's a learning curve, because unlike when you're doing a PhD, you're at a different level. So there's not so many, you can't just Google, how do I measure this, because you're the one figuring that out. So so I think it can just be a bit of a challenge, the the imposter syndrome and kind of getting over that. And then and I think another challenge just with PhD work is it's very self-motivated, so you really have to keep yourself on a schedule and make sure you're keeping up with your goals, because as you know, no one, there's not like, you know, you have your big thesis, you have your big qualifying exams or preliminary exams, but you don't really have like weekly check boxes like I did this, unless you set that up for yourself. So I think those are some of the challenges.
Brilliant. And Colin, would you like to add some to that? And maybe I might pose the additional question to you that, like you mentioned, you would do a PhD all over again in a heartbeat. And so maybe as well as like highlights or challenges, what tips would you give to yourself if you were to do it all over again?
Sure. I think, yes, for me, one of my highlights was kind of different compared to normal is my background was full hardcore engineering from the beginning. So my actual research group was a multidisciplinary arts-led research group. And now that was a highlight for me because it opened a whole new field of thought for me. You know, you put all 10 engineers in a room, they'll come up with the same thing. This was an interdisciplinary group that had artists and dancers and musicians and doctors. And so one of the highlights for me was being able to get fully immersed in fields and areas and discussions I knew nothing about, because that then completely opened up my thought process when it came to a PhD. So that was hugely beneficial. And it was a very salient turning point. I actually had a choice between two PhDs when I picked this one. One of them was a medical-based one between UCD and MIT, and then this multifunction one. And I chose the multifunction one. And my very first seminar, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake, but I didn't at all. It was the perfectly right choice. So the highlight to me was getting outside myself and outside my field to see how other people think, teach, research, and experience. And that's a tip I'd give to people as well. When you're doing a PhD, you're burrowing down a very specific hole in an area. Don't be afraid to kind of dig yourself out of the hole to get some wider perspective every now and again. See what other fields are doing, other areas are doing, other universities are doing, because the problems you're having, they've probably had already. You just might not be able to find that answer. So get out of that is very, very good. The challenges of the research journey is exactly, I'd echo what Tessa has mentioned as well. You don't have these kind of standard reporting points unless you build them in. So you need to make sure you and the PhD journey fit together properly, as in you build your own interaction mechanism with it. Myself, I work to deadlines, but I work to big deadlines. If I try to say I'm going to write 5 pages this week and 5 pages next week, that doesn't work for me. I work right up to deadlines. You know, I might be the person that does 95% of the work in the last 5% of the time. That's just how my brain works and how I need to operate. So I built myself checkpoints. Every couple of months, I would have a deliverable or a chapter drop or a submission paper that I work towards to keep some sort of cadence over the whole duration of the PhD. If you're somebody like me and you don't do that, you'll get nowhere. You'll just flounder in the beginning stages and not make any progress going forward. So one of the main tips I would have given to myself at the beginning was, it's very, very, unless you have a very, very technically specific PhD, it's very, very unlikely the project that the PhD you submit at the end it's very unlikely that will be the same as the PhD project you entered the program with. Mine changed 6 or 7 times, quite drastically, and sometimes from the beginning to the end. And one piece of advice that I would have given to myself and to the rest of you guys is, that's perfectly fine. That's normal. Just embrace it and go with it. If you fight that change, you'll struggle with it. You'll kind of flop around a little bit with it. You'll be very uncomfortable with it. And then you'll inevitably will accept it. Just accept it sooner and realize that these things are going to change. Your journey's going to change. Your focus may change. And once you do that, it'll make the whole process an awful lot easier.
Some really, really fantastic and sage advice that we truly appreciate. So what I might do at this stage is I'm going to stop the recording just in case anyone else wants to ask any questions. But just as I do, I want to kind of one more time formally thank both Tessa and Colin on behalf of Engineers Ireland for some really fantastic presentations and for contributing so greatly to this online lecture. So